Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 588th episode of Constructed Criticism. I'm your host, Mason, joined by my co-host, Abe Stein. Abe, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty great. I'm honestly very excited for the set review because Lorwyn was the first set that came out after I started playing Magic in any capacity that was not like with my friend on the floor of his house or my house.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember it, and I love this plane, and I love the set, and I'm very excited to be having my Universes Beyond moment called Universes Within.
Yeah, they got this weird IP. It's kind of like D&D related, but a card game. It's called
Yeah, it's like a
Magic.
fantasy world. It's got its own kind of thing going. There's a plane called Lorwyn. There were like 4 sets. Not many people knew about it. It did actually invent the mini block. And sorry, this is now going to be a bit of nerding out over why Lorwyn is so great. The 2 set blocks that we had for a period of time really did just have all of the same problems that Lorwyn created for standard in my outside observing eyes of like, oh, Gideon Ally of Zendikar is legal forever. Uh, now replace Gideon Ally of Zendikar with just like Thoughtseize and Cryptic Command, and now you understand. This was just reality forever. It was just these cards were just the best cards, and because of the way set releases worked back then, it never changed. It was awesome going back and watching sets from like matches from then and like worlds coverage from then. That's the good stuff.
I think it was also awesome too because I mean it's the introduction of planeswalkers, right? Like, am I mistaken on that? Am I?
No, that Lorwyn was the first set with planeswalkers. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's like a huge pivotal moment. It's also a moment that I think, back when, not to diss on them too much, but like they did cool teasers where it's like Tarmogoyf mentions Planeswalker. And as far as people knew, Planeswalkers are what you as a player were, right? So it was kind of like, what do you mean a player's in the grave? You know what I mean? Like what is this card type, and having it come out, shortly after and be this new exciting thing. And the Lorwyn 5 also, I mean, like, honestly, 5 really great planeswalkers. I think only Chandra doesn't really hold up. I see Liliana and Garruk and Jace all end up in cubes every now and again, along with a Johnny. So, kind of really
Yeah.
impressive set.
Yeah. I mean, they do hold up.
Yep. And I'll tell you what else holds up. This is the tried and true Magic set review. Listen, we do it a little differently here at Constructive Criticism. A lot of other shows, at least back in the day, Abe, they did like a top 10 list. And this creates some confusion if you're a listener, right? Because I tell you my number 10 card and I give you the caveat that it's like maybe just a personal pet pick of mine, right? I'm like, listen, I really like insert card here. But then you get to number 9 and it's like, wait, is 9 like one step away from the pet pick? Are we in the you know what I mean? Creates a lot of confusion. You have to kind of read the intent. And so we do things a bit differently here on Constructive Criticism. We do a pick 2 set review. And what that means is we're going to have a couple different categories, and we're going to have 2 cards picked from those kind of topics that we're going to lay out in front of you. And with that, that's hopefully going to give you the context. We're also changing up some of the categories. Abe had the idea, let's shake up the box a little bit. He came up with a new category I think is pretty exciting. So we'll get to that when we get to that. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's going to come quickly here. We're also going to try condensing and only doing 3 categories here to try and make it a little better. We understand there's going to be a lot of preview episodes, and some people are really worn out from all the previews. We also know that some of you use our set reviews as your way to dodge preview season. I hear you on how you're kind of like, forever spoilers for you, Mason, you, Abe, go read all the cards. I'm not doing that, and we bring you the bangers. So we still want to have that, and we're going to try and carry that spirit along here. Let us know what you think of kind of condensing the set review. I mean, really down to 6 cards each, which is kind of crazy to think about, just from like a set review perspective, and also the new category, if it was helpful or not. But with that all being said, Abe, let's jump right into our first category. This is sleepers. These are cards that we think are good, maybe even some of the best cards in the set, but people are just not really talking about it or giving it the respect it deserves. And Abe, what's your first sleeper?
My first sleeper, Mason, is Personify. Personify is a 1 and a white instant that says exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Create a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with changeling, so it's every creature type. I think that at least I'd like to think, that in the last few years, it has become evident that flickering creatures and blinking creatures is just like incredibly worthwhile to do and
It is
good at
wild.
reasonable rates.
Yeah.
And like when you think about this card as being almost like Elvish Visionary with Flash, in that it nets you a card of value and is a 1/1, like that's pretty good. But then when it's like, oh, I'm gonna actually evoke my thing and then flicker it, or I'm going to warp my Quantum Riddler and then flicker it. It just lets you cheat on mana, or like you're gonna cast a removal spell on my creature and I'm going to flicker it. Like all of these seem like really, really strong applications for a very easy to line up card in decks that are doing a lot of these things anyway. And so I'm surprised to not hear more people talking about this one. I think it's a really, really strong
Mhm.
card in a really innocuous way.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we've had Splash Portal with Riddler be like a thing that people have been doing. It hasn't been as popular as Is It Lessons, but I mean, Dom Harvey has won and top aided a lot of challenges, sort of playing like Riddler Splash Portal control, right? And I mean, same with like Thundertrap Trainer as like a card you're flickering, and having this sort of be one copies 5 through 8, right? I think is really appealing for decks like that. Just having, even though it's like double the mana, just having more of those effects is often quite good. And that instant speed that you mentioned, right? Splash Portal is a sorcery. It doesn't save on the opponent like in response to a kill spell, right? It doesn't actually like change math with like blockers a lot too. Getting that changeling, like I think your comparison to Elvish Visionary is really apt there, where it's like, oh, I get this 1/1, which is like not really worth my 2 mana value, but I'm kind of just getting it on something that I would probably be pretty interested at paying theoretically for 2 mana at instant speed, anyways, on the Flicker in a standard environment. And then now, like being able to go like, okay, Flicker like my Riddler or whatever, right? Because like we always think about these cards in their best optimal situation, right? Where it's like, oh, I warp the Riddler and then I flicker it. Well, your Riddler draws a lot of cards, Abe, right? You have a lot of flicker effects. You probably draw into more of these. And when it's like sitting around and you like attack in, and then they think they're going to crack back in a race, and you flicker your Riddler, heaven forbid you draw 2 off it, right? And then now you got that 1/1 and the 4/6 to block. That's like kind of Magical Christmas Land in the sense that you like, I don't know, you had cards that lined up well, but it's also just like super reasonable and will happen a ton if this card does end up seeing a lot of play. And that's only thinking about Riddler, right? There's a lot of potentially really strong ETB creatures, in standard that could work really well with this. And a card that actually we talked a lot about when it was previewed that does a similar thing as Sun Imperial Kirin, right? We talked about that flash coming in and reusing our creatures as being so powerful. It has been a fringe player in standard, I think, since its release. And this card's kind of in that space, but even stronger.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of the same synergies that Kieran has because of like picking up any non-land permanent. But you also don't have to recast the thing. So if you're playing a deck that has a lot of creature effects, or is trying to protect creatures, even like there's a lot of backbreaking value when it comes to personify. And I think at least for standard, like this is about as good a rate as you can get in the format, right? Like we're not going to get Ephemerate, we're not going to get even like Cloud Shift, like just single mana. Like you're talking about Splash Portal being a sorcery that does this in blue, and it's like a part of a package that is played in standard. I think that this effect at 2, and with the additional value attached, just seems like it has to be a player.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just imagine also like blue white, like good value stuff, right? Like that Riddler deck. I mean, that Riddler deck could also just be Jeskai, but also cards like Aven Mind Sensor, right? Like, oh, excuse me, not even Mind Sensor, the one that plots a creature, right? Like that's a really strong thing to flicker. There's a lot of really good things to flicker in standard, but we haven't had an instant speed way to do it yet. So yeah, I think that's a great one.
Yeah. So my second sleeper is Iron Shield Elf. Iron Shield Elf is a 1 and a black 3/1 elf warrior with discard a card. This creature gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. This is like not a huge, like exciting card, I think. It's a very similar, in fact, identical to some cards that exist in white. But looking at like changing where that lies in the color pie to being a black effect and how that changes things. Like black has a lot of great graveyard synergy things. There's a lot of things that like want to be able to be discarded. I think about the Mayhem cards from Spider-Man. That just slotting this into that color, I think opens up, especially as we're looking at a larger standard format, opens up a lot of potential. And I mean, looking at like Monument, like the original Monument decks, the Boros Monument decks, you might remember, Mason, were playing, the white enlist 2-drop that had discard a card, give destructible. Just you had a discard outlet to get the most out of your monuments. I think that Iron Shield Elf has a lot of similar potential, and while it might not be as effective of a monument deck in terms of being like turbo monument like Lessons is, I think that an effect like this, especially being an elf, being a resilient creature to a lot of the removal out there, and having some good play with a lot of synergies that have existed and been printed around it, I think this is a card that has a lot of room to mature. On how you feel about it, Mason.
Yeah, no, I think you said a lot of things are good. I think color shifting and like getting access to an effect, especially when the effect like is so synergistic with something that's that color's identity, right? So like black and reanimate, right? Like that's the thing that really resonates with me. So like this just being there, it's like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And then I think your point about the Mayhem cards from Spider-Man, everyone's favorite set, it really hones true, especially Carnage. Maximum Carnage, I believe was the card's name. It's a 4-drop, 4/3. When you play it, bring back a 3-drop from your graveyard, 3-drop or less, excuse me, and it must attack. And when that thing attacks, sack it. And Mayhem it for 2, which Mayhem is just madness with like rulings that actually work. So this thing, like being able to play this on 2 and it potentially discard both parts of that, or even just like be that engine for that deck, is super important. This plus Inti, like I've actually, so my F&M deck that I play at Standard, I'll either play something I'm actually going to play an Event Abe, or I'll play Red Black Spider-Man, which is just all the Mayhem villainy cards.
Oh, hell yeah.
You and I never talk about this, but I actually play that deck a lot at F&M. And it's an Inti deck too, right? And like this plus Inti is actually a really great way when you're flooding out, as like a way to like redraw and move through your deck. Right? Obviously, Inti works when it attacks as well, but you don't always be able to get into combat, right? Where sometimes you're like attacking your Inti and kind of hoping to hit the right card. So Iron Shielded Elf, definitely, it's a role player. And I don't think this is, I mean, maybe it's enabling a whole new deck, right? And it is birthing it, but I think this card is much more like the Joey Wheeler to some Yugi Moto, if that makes sense, right? Like it's backing them up and it's a big part of the team, but it's not the thing that people are like losing sleep over, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's no Dark Magician, but it might be like a Summon Skull or a Kunai with Chain.
Oh,
it might be a part of the cast of characters, mystical elf, if you will.
I think Kunai with Chain is the best way to describe this card. And if you watch Yu-Gi-Oh from back then, growing up, and it was your childhood, hopefully you remember that scene. Kunai with Chain, what a classic. Oh man. All right, well, I've got some maybe modern day classics here for my sleepers. It's kind of funny, I'm gonna spoilers, both my sleepers are mythics, but I have not seen a ton of talk about these mythics, and they actually even read really flashy to me. So looking around, I'm surprised at some of the pre-order prices, which sometimes is a way that I'll like maybe tiebreaker if I think so, if I've seen a little bit of talk but not a lot. And I'm just gonna hop right into it now, with the first one being Catharsis, which is maybe my one that's a bit more out there. So Catharsis is 4 red-white hybrid, so 6 mana total for a elemental incarnation. So this creature has 2 abilities. When this creature enters, if white was spent to cast it, create 2 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature tokens. If red was spent to cast it, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn, and evoke for red-white hybrid. So the joke is, on all these evoke elementals this set, you can evoke for double pips and get one of the 2, and then if you hard cast it, you get the whole thing. Hard casting Catharsis, I think, actually is like pretty powerful. I mean, it is 6 mana, which is a lot for a standard deck, but it's like, make It's a 3/4. Make 2/1/1s, and then give everything you have +1/+1 and haste. And even if it's just those things, on an empty board, that's I believe 8 power. If I did my math right there, that's a lot. And I don't think you're really playing this card for its 6 mana body, right? Like, I think that's something that happens when the game floods out. I see this as something like you're a token deck, Abe, probably Boros, but like really this is your raise the alarm. And then your token deck also really likes to have an anthem effect. So it's sort of good early, good late, right? Like your raise the alarm is a little bit more flexible, being an instant, but this is sort of like, okay, turns, 2, 3, 4, I build my board, and then turn, let's say 4 or 5, it's like, pushing that lethalish damage. And if the game floods out, it's a really great top deck for a archetype of deck, excuse me, that normally lacks that kind of great top deck.
Yeah, this is kind of like a different kind of Imidane's Recruiter, where rather than being like Imidane's Recruiter is a little bit unique in that it itself is a pretty good aggressive cheap body. So the Convoke decks really, really loved having it. But in concept, right, being able to have a card that is a bit of an army in a can create multiple bodies and then leverage them. This gives you access to okay, well, I have a lot of mana. Maybe I just played a single threat and I'm giving it haste and pumping the rest of my team to push through some damage on a turn before turn 6, or the full on I'm going to cast this, get all my triggers and get a big attack in, or between there, like you said, using that as your 2 tokens for 1 card, which is pretty strong thing to do, and plays well with some of the other all the things we've seen people do with Evoke before, flickering, reanimating. It's just a really strong effect to have, like white in the right deck, white make 2/1/1s with kicker for 4, 2 red to instead get 8 power. We said like 6 more power, and giving those things haste is a really, really big plus. And I think that in the right deck, that has a lot of potential.
Yeah, I mean, we saw heroic reinforcements, I believe, like top 8 a couple pro tours. That's a 4 mana version of both these evoke things, right? So obviously you can't evoke those both and do this unless there's like a weird Thalia situation happening for creatures. But they don't really make cards like that. But for 2 more mana, you get this 3/4, and I don't know. I think it's interesting. One thing I will note is, personify one of your sleepers. Weirdly okay with some of these evoke elementals, but never as good as something I think like Riddler, because you don't get any of their ETBs, right? And all of their stats aren't like, at least I personally don't think, good enough to be kind of like, okay, I'm gonna evoke Catharsis for white, get my 2 guys, and then flicker, and now I got my changeling token and this. Obviously, that will end up being the best deck in standard, but
well, really, it's you got to evoke it for red, trigger on the stack, flicker, and then you get your token, and then you're attacking for 6.
Actually, that sounds really strong. That I had not thought about.
You're thinking about more tokens. I'm thinking about more fast.
Yeah. I'm 2 token, you're 2 fast. This all makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I you know what, that might actually like really move the needle on this one. Maybe does actually end up getting there. I thought maybe my next one might do it because its body is the biggest, I think, of all of them. But yeah, Catharsis, either way, I'm probably going to end up playing a good amount of this card if there's any sort of token strategy. And I think token strategies are often, they have a weekend where they're very, very good, and they're like the best thing to do by a lot. But we'll have to see if one really breaks through with this set.
While we're talking about that deck shape, I do just want to bring up, in addition, we're not going to talk about this on one of the cards we chose, but Risk the Evermore giving persist to another creature has a lot of big potential in the same space. So just thinking about like evoking this and then giving it persist in the same way. You can stack your triggers to do that too, and then the Risk has haste as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point. My next one is Wistfulness. So this is the evoke, the elemental incarnation. It does evoke for the blue and green. So this is 3 blue green, so 5 mana total for a 6/5. And it says, when this creature enters, if green was spent to cast it, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. If blue was spent, draw 2, then discard a card. And then obviously it has evoke for Simic Hybrid. I mean, the big thing about this card to me is it really stands out in the Superior Spider-Man Living End deck in Standard, where you're trying to, fill your graveyard up. You're trying to sometimes play a fair game, and artifacts and enchantments are always causing you headaches, right? Like, this card is less about its raw appeal, even though I do think it's quite appealing, and is more about like, hey, this will solve a problem, put a big body in your graveyard, or it will help set you up and then put a big body in your graveyard. And that deck actually makes a lot of land drops, so hard casting this is pretty reasonable.
Yeah, and notably, Superior Spider-Man, you can get
The blue mode. Well, I guess
the blue mode. You can also get the green mode. You can't get both at the same time. But like between this and the blue-black one, Deceit, there's a lot of, I think, tools in enabling that in a more traditional, like, okay, I want to be like a setup creature combo deck trying to reanimate these, or maybe pivoting to not being like so all in on living ending, just being more mid-rangey with that kind of Parmesan finish that we're so accustomed to talking about here on the show. And yeah, I mean, the green exile target artifact or enchantment with all of the other upsides of this card. I mean, I've played against the reanimated deck, and they've played like literally Reclamation Sage.
Yeah.
I think we can do a little bit better than literally Reclamation Sage in 2026. And Wistfulness seems like it's in line with doing that, especially with the ability to play like this catalog on turn 2. Like it's just a good mix of setup or answer or value threat, right? You can get all three.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's totally reasonable for them to be playing like one of these in their main deck with the intent to be like, I'm normally playing it for the blue mode, right? If I'm evoking. But also, there are a lot of good artifacts and enchantments in Standard right now. They're seeing a lot of play. Hitting those is great. And like, this is just sort of like like a pretty reasonable body. Like reanimating a 6/5, off everything is not the end of the world. And like what you mentioned with the Spider-Man, like being able to do that again, I think is actually secretly really strong. I mean, imagine you're playing game 1 versus the, is it Lessons deck, excuse me. And, you play this Wistfulness even on like turn 3 a little awkwardly, maybe with a tap land. You blow up, let's even just say like an Artist Talent. The game progresses a little bit. They play either Artist or a Monument, and then you Superior Spider-Man green it again, right? Or you're just top decking because you mulliganed, and you Wistfulness, you did that early, and then you use the Superior Spider-Man, like you mentioned, to catalog, draw 2, discard 1, set up a little bit more, right? Just try to dig yourself out of it. I think that's actually really, really potent and something that like ends up potentially even being like a one of main deck card with a couple more on the sideboard. So
yeah, and I think it's also, having played the Lessons matchup a bit, like there are a lot of games where you kind of against Lessons or with Lessons are just kind of looking at your opponent, especially in like it's kind of a Chinese finger trap situation. And for the Superior Spider-Man deck to be able to have something that punishes that play pattern of, okay, like you don't want to commit your mana to tapping out to playing your threat until maybe you leave up a removal spell. Well, now let me 2-for-1 you, like really 3-for-1 you. Let me get my creature in play, exile your thing, and draw 2 cards and discard a card, like replace itself. And then make you have a combustion technique or something to answer this. Just seems like it's definitely got a lot of chops.
Yeah, I also think this might be the death of Torpor Orb in sideboards. Torpor Orb has been like a card that, well, I'll say this, Torpor Orb against the Living End deck, right? Like, it's been a card that kind of hits Living End and hits the Bant Airbending deck. And, if you go turn 2 Torpor Orb on the play and I go turn 2 Evoke Wistfulness and get a 6/5, that might be game.
Handshake emoji all around.
Yeah, it's listen. I've had people evoke, like, play the Torpor Orbs against my Evoke Elementals in Modern, and there's a lot of games where I used to evoke a Fury and just be like 3/3 double strike, go, and like the removal spells there could easily handle that card. They do not easily handle Wistfulness in Standard. So, anyways, let's move on to the new section. This is your brainchild, Abe, so I'll let you introduce it to the world.
Yeah, so, I guess if we're talking about categories, right, and we're talking about, sleepers, talking about hits, we had favorites, we had hopefuls, but every preview season, there are cards that everyone gets excited about, or maybe just everyone you see gets excited about it, and maybe you fall for it, it doesn't pan out right. The Aurelia's Fury Award
Mm-hmm.
on resleevables. I'm going to give a hat tip to them. But these cards really are just bait. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everyone is talking about how they're going to play this card. It's going to be so good. And then if you show up with that card to your week one standard tournament, you're immediately like, why did I do this? I can't believe I just spent $45 on a playset of these cards or more just to build the rest of this deck. And oh my God, it's terrible.
Assassin's
So,
Trophy is what really jumps out to me if you played in the standard back then.
oh yeah. Yeah,
Oh
that's a good one too, for sure.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, these are the cards that are the biggest bait. They're the ones that they look good, or you'll see people really hype about them. But at least in our eyes, and we could be wrong. I think this has a lot of the same fun as sleepers, in that we
Yeah.
get a chance to really call our shots. Uh,
We really get the double egg on our face, right? Because sleepers, sometimes we look like geniuses. Sometimes it's like Mason said, Yorgon's the best example of a companion. So sometimes you get got, and with the bait, where we're getting a chance to kind of, potentially we get to look like geniuses, like either people believe in this, but also we said so and so is bait, and it's the best card in standard. Oops.
Yeah, definitely. And also I think this is a good opportunity to say, if you like this, if you don't like this, if you have ideas for other things you want us to do, great chance to leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts on this, to see if this is something we should keep doing, if you want, another category to work its way back in to get kind of more cards in the set review. We want to just make sure it's a good fit. So anyway, without further ado, my first bait card. Are you ready, Mason?
I'm so ready.
My first bait card is Kinscare Sentry. Now, this is a 1 and a white 2/2 first strike lifelink Kithkin Soldier that says, whenever this creature attacks, you may put a creature card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, where X is the number of attacking creatures you control. I have seen and talked to many people who think this card is going to be a huge deal. It's going to be the next coming of white weenie aggro decks. And I have one simple question, which is, what on earth is this good against?
Well, well, it's good against Burn. It's first strike lifelink, Abe. It's a 2/2.
It looks very good against the card Shock, I agree.
Oh wait, no, it's 2 mana. Oh well, luckily no one plays Burst Lightning either.
Yeah, no one would play Burst Lightning, no one would play Shock, no one would play Torch the Tower. And also, like, okay, so we're gonna cheat some things. What are we gonna put into play again?
Our Catharsis, get a little 3/4. I'm trying to brew a little live. Yeah, it's
How are we gonna get 6 attacking creatures? Like,
oh yeah, it's equal to mana value. That's right. Yeah,
yeah.
I was thinking it was equal to power for a second there. I was thinking of the red sneak attack from the set. Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, like this and Voice of Victory, I think is like that's kind of like your pitch in my mind. Like you go 1-drop, voice, somehow this everything hasn't died, and you're like sneaking something in. I really don't know what you're trying to kind of do with this card.
So I didn't come here to hate without an answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
My thought, and this is, I want your opinion on Mason.
Yeah,
So
right.
I think that there's room for it to exist maybe in this way. You have there are multiple white and blue creatures that cost 2 mana in the format that have an additional cost of tapping other permanents. There's a white 4/4. And then there's the River Spirit.
Okay.
That has Waterbend 5. And then there was also that blue-white rectangles deck with like Spyglass Siren and Thraben Inspector, Novice Inspector, and like what's the name, Cosmic Grand Zenith. So you could maybe do a play on those things where you're kind of flooding the board and then you're playing these efficient flyers, or if you play this on turn 2 after one of those 1-drops that are pretty resilient and aren't really great to be exchanged with, then you get to put this into play. I think Oculus is also like the other card that came to mind as being probably good. But that's where I come back to my original question, is what is that good against in the format right now? Like,
yeah. And also what is that good against, like in the abstract too, in my mind? right? Like less even format, but more like when is this a powerful thing to be doing? Because then you don't have this card, the deck you did describe. Even if we get the best ones to play and we narrow it down, it's full of creatures that are all prohibitively hard to play.
Yeah, maybe there's other ways to sneak them in that I'm not thinking of right now in the format. Like,
Yeah.
or maybe you could do like some recommission style stuff, helping hand.
I wonder if this
You
is
know,
just best in like a one drop heavy deck, where like what this is really doing is like kind of like the spyglass stuff you're saying of just like cheat out some more ones so your curiosity goes a little harder. You know what I mean? Where your enduring innocence goes a little harder.
yeah, or it even puts those things into play, right? Turning your three
Yeah.
drops, they're clunky 3 drops into giving you kind of a bonus action of, okay, well, let me attack with this and my mobilized creature, put into play my enduring thing, and then I still have my mana because my creatures in play have now generated mana. But I think just in the context of the current standard format, and this is where I think it really is bait, is like we have a pile of decks that are all like drag racing use. Like this is not good against the landfall decks. This is not good against the decks that are effectively trying to answer every single creature you put into play and then kill you with their artifacts and enchantments like lessons. This does not seem particularly good against Jeskai.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't think of a matchup where this is a card I want to play, even though it does look fun and strong and aggressive. But I've seen a lot of people very excited about it, and I've had a lot of conversations about this card being a player, and I'm just not quite buying it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. What's your other bait spell?
Yeah, my other card that's bait is Moon Shadow. So Moon Shadow is a single black 7/7 elemental with menace that enters with 6 -1/-1 counters on it. So it comes in as a 1/1. And says whenever one or more permanent cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere while this creature has a -1/-1 counter on it, remove a -1/-1 counter from this creature. So I think this card is bait because it is at its heart a 1 mana 1/1 for 1 that then requires you to pour more mana into milling yourself or discarding things or sacrificing permanents to grow it. And while that can be really powerful, I don't think that, and maybe this is just me being standard brained right now, I don't think that it's very good at being fast enough at being big to really make an impact. And I think it doesn't, like, even if you are good at making it big, they've printed a lot of good answers to cards like this. Like there's a lot of ways to kind of undo this, whether it be, okay, well, you have a large body now, let me just boomerang basics it and then you start from the beginning again. Or Flood Maw, or I know there's a new black removal spell that we'll be talking about. So it just seems like it's not, and it's not generating any advantage, right? It's just turning your self mill into stats.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah, and maybe I'm discounting that. Maybe playing this on turn 1 and then like Dredger's Insight on turn 2, and then having this thing be like a 5/5 is good. If that's even how it works. I'm trying to.
I'm reading the card. I don't think that's. I think it's the instances of putting in. It looks to me like if you were to mill 40, for example.
Yeah, because it says 1 or more.
Yeah. So like milling 40 is actually not good. You want to mill 40 one time, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd want to be activating your Molt Tenders.
Yes. Yeah, this is Molt Tender's friend. This is Gnarlhound's friend. This is not Dredger's Insight. I mean, I guess it's kind of because they're the rest of them are friends. But yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you there. On standard, this does need to be a boomerang basics-less world. I guess to be fair, Avatar will leave. There will be a point with no Avatar, and there will be this set. As you know, we're going to start going by years. Like literally, 2026 will be the year after rotation or something, and not like the weird magic.
2029 will be the year of Moon Shadow.
Exactly.
Because they'll never print another playable unsummon again.
Yeah. To be fair, they have messed up a lot on unsummon, so if there was ever a time, that's going to be the time of how design cycles work too. So, but they're also not going to make things bigger than Moon Shadow, obviously, or anything like that. So in my mind, I think the conversation really turns towards those older formats, right? Like if you play Moonshadow with fetch lands, that's kind of appealing. Moonshadow plus Mishra's Bauble, that's kind of appealing. Moonshadow's pretty good friends with Psychic Frog, right? You can play Psychic Frog on 2, dump some cards, decrease the cost of your Moonshadow, or excuse me, increase the power of the Moonshadow. Um, Even then, though, I'm a little skeptical of this hypothetical world where we're playing like 8 shadows between Death and Moon, some Psychic Frogs, Bobble, Interaction, Thought Scour, and maybe some Oculuses, like, and Unearths. Like, I get that that's kind of a thing that's happened recently in Modern, but it just, I doubt it's going to be like this insane powerhouse unless there's some weird interaction we're really missing where we can turn putting these 6 minus counters onto this into a huge upside. But I do think keyword big is huge, and the fact that Moonshadow has menace is a really big get for it, right? Like when it engages in combat, it is really hard to defeat and beat.
Yeah, I think I guess the closest analogy I can think of is what is it, Stalactite Stalker?
Yeah.
The single black one. It also has menace, but you could like sacrifice it to give something -X/-X for X as its power. But it had descend, so it was kind of capped on how fast it could grow. Maybe if like we're looking at a world where that kind of deck exists, where you want a card like that, and this is more copies of that effect, like a single black 1-drop that does grow, and you're doing a lot of like, oh well, I'll cycle my Street Wraith and use my Mishra's Bauble and fetch. So then really it's just like a 1-mana 4/4. Maybe that's like that actually sounds like it could be pretty strong in a format like Modern.
Yeah. A little suicide black deck that we haven't had in a long time, but like has been close, you know? There's a lot of
Yeah. I can see a vision there if we're playing with modern power level cards that this is something you can push. But I feel pretty safe on saying this card is bait if that's the long shot I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, you know, I still love Pioneer. Something like this in Pioneer, I think, is really cool to think about, but the lack of fetch. I think fetch lands are like what really kind of put us over the edge on this card, right? Where it's like, okay, land for turn, this, you know, gets a little bigger. And that was like landfall, put a counter on it, right? And that's close. So, okay. Anything else you want to say about Moonshadow?
No, that's it makes me sad that it's bait, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it is. How about you, Mason? What did you come up with?
All right, so my first one I want to talk about is probably a card that's going to be disappointing for maybe some people to hear it in this part of the set review, but it's another black creature that I think is bait, and this is Bitter Bloom Bearer. It's black for a creature fairy rogue 1/1. It has flash and flying, and then it has the Bitter Blossom tax. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose a life and make a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with flying. So I just want to. I try to always be really positive on set reviews. So, you know, one of the things that's really strong about Bitter Blossom is that it is a hard to answer card type in enchantment, especially back then. There weren't a ton of great disenchants, right, Abe? So, you know, it was really hard to get that off the board. And then it kind of was this army in the can. You could sort of set in, forget it. And this does have a pretty big advantage of having flash. So your opponent might tap out and do something, and then you can flash this in. You're going to get that guaranteed first trigger. But the cards around it are really where I'm sort of lacking, and it dies to all the removal incredibly easily. Being a 1/1 is very, very fragile in standard right now. Cards like Iros just kind of check this card on their own. And the blue-black mid-range deck that we kind of have right now is somewhat interested in this card. Like, making another 1/1 like, and having more bodies is good for the curiosity part of the deck, but like you're actually, I think, often weirdly racing on life totals. These 1/1 bodies aren't answering enough things in standard, and you're already kind of good at presenting a good string of creatures. So I kind of think Bitter Bloom Bearer needs to have its a new type of deck pop up and have standard really change. And I think like Kaido Curiosity is such a powerful engine in blue and black that I don't think this is going to spawn its own archetype. And that engine isn't, half of it wants this, half of it doesn't super appreciate this. And the blue and black cards have just been kind of mediocre in general. So I think the supporting cast for Bloom Bearer, even though it's getting some upgrades in this set, are not like in a particularly great spot. And I think just all this compounding with it's fairly fragile. In this situation I described, right, Abe, it's sort of like you're on the play, they tap out for a 2-drop, you flash this in. That's fairly realistic, but it surviving multiple turns after that, I think, is fairly unrealistic.
It's so funny that you put this as one of your bait cards because I am a big believer you're gonna have egg on your face for this one.
Okay.
Because for everything you said, it has the like for me when I listen to what you say, I'm thinking about like, okay, so there are natural predators to this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like Iros,
Mm-hmm.
main deck answer to a bunch of 1/1s. That's already kind of good against the blue black deck because they play a bunch of X1s or like,
And
people
preacher.
playing fire
Yeah.
magics. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Things like this. But uh the fact that this card can on its own demand that answer, um like even as just like having the impact of maybe not quite fabling trick but similar, right? If you flash this in on turn 2 in the end step, it lives to your upkeep, you get a token. Now you've gotten 2 flyers for 2 mana and a life, and you're forcing them to answer it right then, or you get a third flyer and pay a life. That seems pretty okay to me. Then like in the games where you're saying like the deck is really good at presenting additional streams of creatures often, when that doesn't cost you mana, at least my experience playing the blue
Mm-hmm.
black decks, when you have to spend your mana producing blockers to stay in a race you're trying to win in the air, that usually is how you like wind up suffocating yourself. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that adding like 1 to 2 blockers and making that race about like, oh well, now I'm always going to have additional things on defense, and I can block this away, and maybe I can change up my threat base, take advantage of some of the fairy synergies. Like I think there's potential there. I think there's more potential there than like this being a big miss. Although I definitely don't think it's the guaranteed hit I've seen a lot of people talk about it as.
Yeah,
Like
so like you wouldn't put
Peter
this in your
Blossom
hit
is a
category.
very different. I I might have put it in my hit category uh if
Interesting.
I had picked some other things, but I would not have felt so solid about it compared to
Sure.
some of the other hits that are out there.
Okay.
Because I think that like and I think compared to Bitter Blossom, like this is a very different card
Mm-hmm.
because it can die so easily compared to Bitter Blossom, which like you would solo a game. You go Thoughtseize into Bitter Blossom. It was like Thoughtseize Pack Rat, but like crazier because you didn't have to spend your mana anymore. You then suddenly just left up all your mana, answered everything your opponent did, and amassed an army of fairies. And then you misbind clicked them or played a Scion of Una, and they all had +1/+1, and that had flash and everything in Shroud, and they couldn't do anything anymore, and you're dead. Like that was kind of the world it lived in. But I don't know. I think there's a lot more upside here than like the dies to the Doom Blades around that you're giving it, and I think maybe the upsides in the existing shells might be higher than you're giving them credit for.
Mm-hmm. Um, I guess like how do I say this? The dies to Doomblade thing. I guess part of what I'm saying is like it does do that, like it dies to everything. Like I guess it is fair, kind of what I said, but also the bodies it's making are not great bodies, right? So I think this card really is tied to like what are you doing with those bodies? And in cards like Curiosity or jump out to me as like powerful, right? Like, okay, I've got a lot of things I go wide. I mean, theoretically, like some sort of anthemy type of thing, right? Or payoff in that regard, potentially interesting. Um, but yeah, I think, ultimately, like imagine the stuff we're doing in Sand right now. It's so hard to imagine this card like putting up a resistance against an Ouroboros or just like these huge chocobos even, right? Like getting trample and attacking through, or like even the Is It Lessons deck. You look at the jet, like everything going on in Sand right now just seems like it lines up really well against this. And I get it, things are going to change. But right now, I just a hard believer on Bitter Bloom Bearer with the cards I know about right now really being some huge all star.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's a lot of other things that can outclass it, and especially I know that I think you and I are of differing opinions on just how bad Demir is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I think that ties into kind of our feelings on this card's position.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fair. Next up is a Johnny Outland Chaperone. One white for legendary planeswalker Johnny, 3 loyalty. +1, create a 1/1 green and white Kifkin creature token. -2, deal 4 damage to target tapped creature. And then -8, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is your life total. You may put any number of non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. I mean, one of the things I've sort of seen some people be pretty high on in regards to this card is like I've seen it kind of comp to the Wandering Emperor. You know, like it doesn't have flash, but it comes down fairly cheaply and answers a tap
Mhm.
thing, and then kind of can take over the game. And obviously, Wandering Emperor didn't have like an ultimate. It kind of just had like make your tokens bigger. And from what I've seen too, most people aren't really super interested in the ultimate. Maybe your control deck does have something, and like what I imagine really happens is you ultimate, you get a bunch of lands in play in your control deck, and you find another copy of a Johnny, right? Like that's probably the realistic outcome. All of that doesn't seem particularly strong to me. And in like a tokeny Kifkany deck, maybe the deal 4 damage will line up contextually really well with the format at large, right? But right now I'm not seeing that really be the thing. So I kind of got Johnny here.
This is a worse bitter bloom bearer. This is like we're gonna make so many 1/1s together, my friend.
Mhm.
You and me, Johnny, we're gonna make so many Kithkin. Yeah, I think that like a Johnny by even like 2018, 2019 standards
Mhm.
looks really good. It plays by a lot of rules of planeswalkers that are traditionally really good. Defends itself, can trade for a card immediately, so you get your value out of your sorcery. Um, but I don't know that the juice you get is worth the squeeze. Like, how much is it worth to get a 1/1 every turn and threaten to deal 4 damage to a tapped creature like every other turn? Like, all that means to me is that my opponent is just not going to attack this unless it's going to die,
Mhm.
or they're going to kill a bunch of my things in the process to try to keep it alive to be able to minus it to kill my thing. And that just doesn't seem very good. Now, it is an important card to know exists because it's probably like a best option
Mhm.
for a lot of decks to be able to have persistent sources of creatures. But uh, I'll have to see how good a 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature is before I can evaluate this, because it feels like this is a very slow way to make 2 or 3 of these.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Let's go on to hits then. Hits are the cards we think are going to land in standard, maybe the opposites of bait. These are going to be cards that we're really confident are going to probably make a huge impact or define a deck, etc. Abe, what's your first hit?
My first hit is Formidable Speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So Formidable Speaker is Johnny Praz's World Champion card, which I think is really awesome. But it's also a 2/4 for 2 and a green. It's a creature elf druid. And when it enters, you may discard a card, and if you do, search the library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you knew this, Mason, but there's a lot of decks in Standard right now that are doing very well by
Mm-hmm.
playing a lot of Mana Dorks and Badgermole Cub, and then using ways to find the exact right creature to leverage
Mm-hmm.
their mix of Mana Dorks and creatures,
Mm-hmm.
like in general. And this feels like it does all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you feel. Like, not only does it act as kind of like a half mana. If you have a cub or two, this starts netting mana, but like otherwise, it's just a body you can accelerate into. Right, turn 1 Land Elf, turn 2 Formidable Speaker, turn an excess land or an excess mana dork into the payoff you need, or vice versa. And I don't know, it just seems really, really strong to give that kind of grease in the wheels to a color that has a lot, in the form of giving it the card selection to find the right creatures, and especially those toolboxy pulls. I know that like Mason Wadana played played Simic to, I think he wound up conceding to 2 members of the top 8 to get them to the top 8 of the Spotlight series. The Simic Aurora deck was one of the top performing decks of the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and this feels like a strict upgrade for that deck alone. So definitely a really strong card. Interested to see what it does, but I would be very surprised if it is not among the top cards of the set when the dust settles.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. I don't have anything really to add. I just think it is a pretty easy, like a great include in there. I always spend a lot of time talking about wellness and like trying to like get the crossbar that would be good, like in the Spider-Man deck. I think this one is like, slam dunk situation for that deck. And if not an actual slam dunk, it's like a heavy, like it's gonna be a lot of testing and probably get kicked out after many weeks, if that makes sense, right? Like I can't imagine this card not being something that you're like always considering in that shell.
Yeah, you're talking about playing one of creatures to be able to get. I mean, this subsidizes that really well. My other hit is Boulder Dash. So Boulder Dash is a functional reprint of Arc Trail. It's 1 and a red for a sorcery that deals 2 damage to any target, and then 1 damage to any other target. Having played with Arc Trail in Standard in my youth, I'm very excited for this to be back, especially in a world where there are so many mana dorks. There are not many cards that like produce backbreaking 2-for-1s like an Arc Trail, especially in the early stages of the game. And I think that this is a card that easily slots into a lot of decks that don't have good access to maybe wanting to play sweepers, or maybe want to have a bit more proactive approach and skew on what they're doing. And it like cleanly answers some cards that are pretty difficult to cleanly answer, like Badger Mole Cub, or really being a good tool to fight against. I think the green decks and even the Dimir decks, like anything that's trying to play a strategy of small creatures, this is just incredible against. And like I think at face it's hard to understand just how often this will trade 2-for-1, or just be an acceptable, I will trade 2 mana to kill your thing and like deal you a point. But I'm very excited for it to be back, and I think it's going to make some pretty big impact on the answers people play, especially as people have been saying they feel like the green decks are a little bit too strong.
Yeah, I think this will be pretty big. Also, get wrecked, Bitterbloom Bearer. Clean that up.
Yeah, clean 2-for-1 right there.
Clean. Pick it up. No, I think these effects are often a lot when they're good, they're quite good. And having access to cards like this is pretty important. Also, great name, Boulder Dash here. Just love it.
Yeah, I love the flavor on it. Yeah, it's great.
All-timer in the making. All right, so my first one is a little bit probably more out there compared to my last one, but I'm kind of a believer in this card, and that's Emptiness. Maybe put my foot in the middle a little bit of my mouth here, putting this in my hip, but this is 4 black, white. It's another elemental incarnation. This one's a 3/5, and it says, when this creature enters, if white was spent to cast it, return target creature card from your graveyard with mana value 3 or less to the battlefield. If black was spent, put 3 neg1 counters up to 1 target creature, then has evoke for Orzhov hybrid, just like every other one we talked about today. My big thing about this one, Abe, is I think the black being a kill spell is actually pretty great in combination with things like I forget its name now. I talked about it earlier in the show. The Pixie with Flash, Sunpure Karen, and Nurturing Pixie as well, being reanimated. Sunpure and Pixie picking up Emptiness and sort of being this engine that can go long, and also just being something you can kind of play in the late game, generate a lot of value. It can be a kill spell. I think lots of times the problem with these kind of grindy, value-y cards, like reanimating something over and over again and picking it up, right, is that they don't do anything besides that. And this eventually buys you enough time to kind of come down, kill something, be a 3/5, which is a fairly reasonable body in like a mid-rangey matchup. But also, early game, it has the opt-out of being, hey, I'm just a kill spell, right? Like, I'm just going to kill, that Emberheart Challenger, that Slickshot Show Off, that Badger Mole Cub, right? I'm going to take that Grand down. And you want it for loftier reasons, but you get that buyout clause, and that's something I'm a really big believer in. And I don't know, I kind of have a lot of faith in Emptiness. So that's where I'm at with this one.
Yeah, I never really thought of it as like a self-contained engine with like Pixies. But you're right in that, like, just for white, you can just get back the pixie, pick this up,
Hmm.
and then you just have the pixie at card neutral, which is pretty great. Um, Same with Kieran. Or if you get to the late game and this is like, you have one or two of these in your deck, you find it over time, you would just cast Emptiness for 6,
Hmm.
rebuy a Kieran or a Pixie, right? Get your 3 -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creature and buy this back. Like, that is, I mean, chef's kiss black white sewer value. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, pay all my mana, get a card ahead on you, rebuy this thing to do it again. Like, it is a real attrition machine in that setting. And I could see that being. I think it's hard to play an attrition strategy right now, but uh, I think that it has, right, because the floor is that you have the ability to just go, okay, black, kill your thing. Um, like that's a pretty decent rate given the rest of the modality of the card.
Hmm. Yeah. Um. Yeah. Just I'm. I might have some egg on my face on this set review. I'm taking some swings on some stuff, but I got a lot of faith in emptiness. It might require some other stuff changing for this to really happen, but I just have faith in that sort of potential package. And then last but not least, Requiting Hex. This is black for an instant. As additional cost to cast a spell, you may blight one. Blight is you may put a -1/-1 counter on a creature. And then this spell is destroy target creature with mana value 2 or less. If this spell is paid with this additional cost, you gain 2 life. So if you blight, you gain 2. But no matter what, it's black instant, destroy target creature with mana value 2 or less. That is just a really potent, powerful removal spell. Lots of comps. I've heard a lot of people say this is the new Fatal Push, Abe. I don't really think it's the new Fatal Push by any means, but it is like a kill spell that will see a lot of play and will be important. Behind the scenes, I almost like thought about putting this in bait because of how high on people are in this card, right? And wanting to talk it down a little bit. But at the end of the day, it was sort of like, listen, we are going to play it. It is going to be efficient, and it is going to be a good way for these black decks, I think, to have better cards than like Stab that they can use to answer a Badgerable Cub on the draw that like scale into the late game and actually answer some permanents. And when you do Blight and you gain the 2 life against a deck like Mono Red or something, like that is going to be pretty important. Like countering one of their burn spells or a couple of their like Razorkin triggers is pretty great. And then picking up that creature with like your Kaito, for example, is something that I can pretty easily imagine is sort of undoing the blight, quote unquote.
Yeah, I also think like it's understated just how much like FOMO and Duelists of the Mind have been able to run rampant in the format, and even Tiger Sim to an extent, because they're just so impossible to trade with
Mm-hmm.
at rate or below rate. And Requiting Hex is like it sits among Spell Snare as like ways to add it to the format to kind of apply pressure to these hyper efficient strategies in terms of answers. Um, but I think that just the existence of this card, whether or not it sees high play rates in high numbers, still to me is a hit if it brings down the efficacy of strategies that are relying on like these 2 mana X3s that are otherwise, kind of running the show.
Mm-hmm.
Where like you can't, no longer do you have to worry that that Emberheart Challenger Prouster is going to ruin your stab. If you just have the ability to Requiting Hex it and look at them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just a really. It also still does all the things that Stab does normally, right? Um, trading for dorks and bats and jackals and flood pitch drowners and whatever else
Yeah.
comes your way on turn 1 and turn 2. It trades with those and then does that perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Fatal Push because it will not really blow your opponent out and trade them up huge on mana, but a lot of Fatal Push is traded with a lot of Heart of Kierans, and I feel that for Requiting Hex uh, being something it gets to do.
Yeah, I think like the one good thing about Stab is sometimes you would get a little cheeky with it. You know what I mean? Like I attack like my creature into your preacher and then I stab your preacher, so now it's like an O2. Right? Like that's like Stab's like big selling point in comparison to a card like this. But also in comparison to that, a lot of these early creatures really scale out of control. Like Abe, if you get Egg on your face with Moonshadow, Requiting Hex is going to be an important card in that mirror, right? Like having
Exactly.
something that answers that, or like just even imagine a Badgermole Cub with one Ouroboros trigger, right? Like just being able to kind of clean that up. Even like let's say you shoot the sheriff down the Ouroboros after it triggered, and then being able to kind of draw this and be like, okay, let's answer that 3/3. That's going to be like a common thing that happens. You know, I think a lot of people probably wish this was Smother, which is 3 or less mana, but I think 2 is going to be good and it's going to see a lot of play. It's going to be a card you're happy to. And I think the Blight 2 will come up a surprising amount in the late game. There's going to be a lot of times where you're like in a racing situation and, like kill that creature, blight onto one of my guys, like when you're attacking back and basically, gain like 5 life essentially from where you're expected to be is pretty huge.
Kill that creature, kill my Bitterbloom Bearer.
Mm-hmm.
Change the math.
Mm-hmm. Okie dokie. Well, that is it for Lorwyn Eclipse. I'm really excited for this set. This set is a weird one for me where it's like a lot of my friends really love Lorwyn. And I don't have that same reverence for it. I do have a lot of respect from it from like the design perspective and things like the Planeswalkers we talked about or whatever. But like I never got to really experience it, so I'm pretty excited. And I think there are a lot of really cool cards. I think there are a lot of cards that could have been on my hits or on my sleepers. And not as many cards that could have been on my bait, which I think is, going to be maybe our new metric for how good a set is, right, Abe? Are we struggling on the bait category, or are we struggling to, find a good sleeper? And I think, this set for me at least, it was, sleepers. There's plenty of them, lots of things to potentially look at, and a lot of places to explore. And I'm really excited to get into the set.
Yeah, I mean there are additional like low-hanging fruit hits we left on the table, like removal spells. I mean the shock lands are coming back. Like some real great stuff in the set, and honestly probably saved me about an hour in the process of writing my set review that we didn't do favorites, because there's so much that is really faithful to the plane of Lorwyn. The art's fantastic. The kind of whimsical fantasy setting is really good. I can't say enough nice things about like I said, this is my Universes Beyond to get my thing that I loved when I was 13 or 14.
Yeah, this is
to see it on a Magic set.
That's crazy to think about, right?
Yeah. This is 14 years after I started showing up to an LGS. Yeah.
That's so wild. Well, awesome. No Patreon questions this week. We're going to post straight to patreon.com/ccmtg. No Always Improving this week. These set reviews kind of take a lot of time ahead of time. We like to keep these also a little tight and come back. We know that you might be listening to multiple of them. If someone wants to find you, where can they go?
People can find me over at Blue Sky at More Nothings. You can also find me on Twitter at More Nothings. You can DM me on either platform for coaching, or you can reach out at morenothings@gmail.com. Just put coaching in the description if you're interested. How about you, Mason?
You can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. You can find me at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark. You can reach out to me for coaching via the DMs there on Twitter, or my email, masoniclark@gmail.com. I saw a couple of you that got hidden on Twitter. Twitter's got a lot of bots ever since Musk bought it, and I have to clear up my bots daily. And somehow some of y'all got like hidden underneath even more bots. And so I replied to you. So it was like 4 or 5 of you who maybe want to check your Twitter DMs who said, "Hey, I love the show. And I reached out for coaching. I do have spots, so I would check there." And I'm waiting for some of you to reply. So this is my way to get out to you all. But thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode of Constructive Criticism. We'll be back next week for another episode of CC MTG.